Hello, everyone. We've got a great group today, and we'll just give everyone a second to pop into the meeting. And we're really excited to be here with you today with Lynn-Ann Erickson of Track Talent. She's got an incredible presentation. I've been looking forward to talking about this topic for the last month as we've anticipated this event. So thank you, everyone, for joining. As we're just giving everyone a minute to log on, just to have some intros, feel free to put in chat where you're calling in from today, whether that's state or city or company. We'd love to just hear where everyone's from. And I'm in Logan, Utah, so almost on the Utah-Idaho border.
Yeah, Linden.
And Lynn-Ann, remind me where you're at exactly. I know you're in Utah, right? Linden, okay. So not too far. We're actually pretty close. All right, so we will go ahead and get started. But just as a quick reminder, this is part of our Mobrium webinar series that happens every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. Every second Wednesday. So it's a monthly event, and these are SHRM PDC eligible events. So within 2 days, so by Friday, we will send you out an email follow-up that has the activity code and a recording of this event. So watch for that email within the next 2 days, and that will have all of that information for you. And we definitely invite everyone to share these events with your friends too, so we can help more awesome HR leaders get some of these credits and learn some great things. So we'll jump into today's topic. It's my honor to introduce Lynn-Ann. Lynn-Ann Erickson is a managing partner at Track Talent, where she works with organizations on hiring, leadership, workplace systems, and people strategy. She also teaches in the organizational leadership department at Utah Valley University. Her work focuses on helping organizations build clear and effective workplaces through better communication, stronger leadership practices, and thoughtful
Thank you, Matt. I am so happy to be here.
Thank you, Lynn-Ann, for joining us today.
When I picked this topic of, hiring and candidate experience, I felt like it was just coming up over and over in all these conversations that I've been having with my friends that are looking for jobs and my friends that work in talent acquisition. And it's just absolutely bananas out there. So what a strange time in so many ways that we're living, but especially in, recruiting and talent acquisition. So what I want to talk to you today about the candidate experience is, yeah.
And Lynn-Ann, just to quickly pop in, if you just want to share access on that slides, then I'll pull it right up for you.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
You're totally good. Just click the share button, and then I'll pull it up for you. And thanks, Wendy from Delta Dental of Illinois, Scott Key in Kearns, Utah. At the Utah Olympic Legacy Foundation. Trish Smith, Weston, Idaho, Savannah Shepard, Houston, Texas, and Shannon McCannon from Philadelphia, Angelique Kirk in Austin. Wow. Thanks, everyone, for joining today.
Okay. Did that go through okay for you? Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. We can go to the next slide here. But the things that we'll be talking about today with candidate experience, whether our candidates have a positive or a negative experience, can cause us to have lift or drag in our recruiting function and in our organization as a whole. And our aim is hopefully that we can have positive experiences, and also that helps us right now in our current role with the positions we're trying to fill right now, but also all of those things going forward. It will help us, our future selves. And then the other side of that would be the drag, right? If we get this wrong and our candidates are having negative experiences, it hurts us now, but it also makes it trickier for us in the future, and it makes it a heavier lift, and it can provide drag and not so great things for our brand. So as we talk a little bit more about the candidate experience, that's kind of the frame that I want us to think of. Is we're talking about our processes now, but also we want to make sure we're being strategic in how this helps us in the future. Okay, Matt, we can head to the next one. So these are kind of the 5 main areas that I want to have a talk about today. So our hiring processes and how that reflects who we are and the culture of our workplace, and that every candidate is going to leave with a story, and it's our job to hopefully help them have a positive story, and that this whole process is built on trust, and consistency will help us build that. And a little bit of a conversation on the mindset shift for us as HR pros to think a little bit more like experience architects. And then, of course, we have to have a conversation about metrics at the very end, and we want to talk about what we're going to measure and how we're going to make progress on this. And we want to make sure we're measuring the experience, not just the efficiency. Okay, let's head to the next piece. Okay, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I do want to have each of you think about when the last time you were a candidate. So if you wouldn't mind popping in the chat, maybe a couple words, maybe like 1 or 2 words to describe your last candidate experience. If for those of you who it's been recent, maybe that will be easier. If it was a long time ago, you could pop in the chat just a couple words that you think would help describe that. Give everyone a minute to think about that. Let's see. Oh, hi, Catherine. I just see you in the chat. Great to see you. Okay, terribly quiet. Oh no. Yeah, it's a rough market out there. I'm sorry to hear that. It feels like when I talk with people, I'm hearing a lot of more negative experiences than positive. But just something to think about. When we're in HR, we get the opportunity of wearing 2 hats. And sometimes there's a little bit of we can get lost in the noise sometimes and kind of forget what it's like to go through the process. So we want to make sure we're keeping that in mind, and also reminding our senior leaders, because maybe it's been a minute for them. And when we think about this process and the changes that we want to make, yes, we want to make these changes so that we have a good recruiting function and that we have a solid business case that it helps deliver results to our organization, for sure. And we're going to talk about that. But also, we want to streamline and improve this process so that it's better for us and for the people we love when they get jobs. So when our little baby niece and nephew go out and apply, they don't have this really scarring, terrible position, experience. Or, if our mom goes and applies for a job, she gets treated fairly. So we want to keep that in mind so that we can always maintain and be empathetic and human and people-centered in all of our decisions. Okay, let's move on. Okay, one thing that's really interesting about culture, and sometimes I have a hard time with just, the word culture with a capital C, but if you'll indulge me here for a minute, a lot of times as an employer, I think it's a really big habit for us to tell our employees or our candidates what our culture is. And sometimes it's not sometimes, all the times, it's how we show. Culture is how we do the work, how the work gets done. So when we think about the candidate experience, I think it's really important to understand that our actions are how they're going to be forming their opinion. It's not going to be on our value statement on the webpage. It's not going to be the information that they can find on the website. It's going to be the interactions they have, and it's going to come down to they got back to me, they were organized, they followed through. that is going to communicate, and that is how we're going to show who we are. And honestly, some of the things that I've been hearing, one of the top words I've been hearing is disorganized, which I feel is really an interesting word to describe it. So hopefully we can give you some tips today to, if you are, and maybe I should ask on the call, is anyone on the call, are you guys directly working? Is anyone directly working in talent acquisition or just HR in large? You can pop it in the chat if you feel like sharing. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so again, like I said, our culture is what we show people, not exactly what we tell them. So if we have behaviors that are negative, things like ghosting candidates, being disorganized, long unexplained delays, that can signal to candidates that we don't communicate, we're not aligned, and we don't make decisions effectively, right? And if we're trying to communicate who we are and show them, we want to make sure that our hiring process is much more streamlined and that it can, and as we design and craft this process, it can show our real values, that we value people, we're thoughtful, we're organized, and that we care. Okay, great. Thanks. Next, Matt. Okay, again, we want to make sure that as we craft this experience, one of the main things that we need to do as HR leaders is gain buy-in from our senior leaders if we want to build and craft a really good employee experience, a good candidate experience. And so we do want to talk about the human-centered approach because that matters a lot. Sometimes our leaders don't always make decisions just on that. And we want to make sure we're talking about the business impact as well. And one of the things I want to just point out from this slide is we have the opportunity from the people that are going through our recruiting process to convert those into potential customers or people to engage with our brand, to engage with our content, and to be loyal fans or followers, even if they don't get the job. And so there is real business impact in this process. And, you know, I think it's really telling the stat here, 64% are less likely to buy your products after a poor experience. Like, it matters when it comes down to, you know, we could be losing potential customers if we're not doing this right. Okay. We can go to the next one. And I think it's really interesting too that we have people sharing their negative experiences as well, 72%. Okay, when we talk about this experience that we're crafting, our friends in marketing are very well versed in understanding and crafting and building positive experiences. If we think about the sales process, there is so much invested and studied and researched into what impacts consumers' decisions and what makes people buy products. And so marketing is already doing a lot of work in here for us about understanding and creating positive experiences. And so I think it's lucky for us in HR, we can just kind of borrow a little bit of their information to help us. But really what marketing does is they look at the process of making a sale and they measure that process by asking a question at the end of the sale. And they measure that with something that's called a Net Promoter Score, or an NPS. So let's talk a little bit about NPS a little bit. You can advance us, thanks. So basically it all boils down into one question. After the experience is over, after the sale is complete, the marketers ask, how likely are you to recommend our company, product, or service? And it's on a scale of 1 to 10. And then depending on how people respond to that, gives them an indication about their sales experience, their experience as a customer with their brand. So if someone is scoring a 0 to a 6 on that scale of an NPS scale, they are what marketers call detractors. They're sharing their negative experience and they're damaging the brand. they are frowny face, red flags, right? If they're a 7 or 8, they're just kind of a meh. And then the promoters, the fans, they're a 9 or a 10. And so what I would like to talk about today is we can use this concept to help us evaluate and look at our process of recruiting here in our HR processes. So let's look at the next slide. We're going to talk about the candidate net promoter score. So basically, it's the same idea, but it gives us an indication of how people are going through our recruiting process, when they think from when they apply to their phone screen, if they get to the interview stage, if they get rejected, like the whole process. It gives us the ability to look at the process and evaluate it. So based on your hiring experience, how likely are you to recommend applying to our organization? So we could use this question to help us evaluate and look at our process. So I think it's a little interesting because a lot of our key metrics, and we'll talk about this later, don't really evaluate the process. They kind of evaluate the outcome, right? Which for sure we want, like we need the roles filled, but they don't necessarily measure how we're doing that. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So as we think about having a positive and a negative experience in recruiting, candidates who have a positive experience are promoters. They will potentially, if they don't get a role, apply again, refer their friends, speak positively about their company, and become future customers. So this is what I'm talking about at the beginning when I was talking about the lift, right? If we do this piece right, it helps us now with the roles we're trying to fill and also the roles in the future. This makes our future selves' jobs easier. If we can capture and retain people who want to apply again when we have a new role, that would be an incredible thing to have. And then, when we talk about our detractors, that's the frowny face, people who had a negative experience, right? They can discourage people from applying, sharing their negative experiences, and potentially increase costs, right? If no one wants to come and work here, then we're going to maybe have to pay more money to figure out how we can fill our positions. People talk, right? We go to lunch with each other. The HR world and the industries we work in aren't very big. If we see each other at conferences and mention I'm looking for a new role, someone could be like, oh, don't go there. I went to 7 rounds of interview and then got ghosted in the final phase, right? Like, unfortunately, that happens and it's so avoidable. So let's talk about crafting a better experience. So, all right, you're like, great, Lynn, we're sold. How do we do this? Well, the first thing that we need to do is we need to shift our mindset a little bit. I think there's a little bit of a piece of, in traditional HR, or what happens is the hiring manager, this has happened to me, I'm guilty of this so many times. The hiring manager comes to me and says, okay, Lynn, this is what I need. I need this person, and this is when I need them. Does anyone want to guess when they need them? Yeah. It's yesterday was the right answer. It was a good try though, Matt. No.
Right away or yesterday.
Yeah. And I need them yesterday. And so we kind of fall into this mindset of being an order taker, right? We just take the orders of what we need, and there's not a lot of strategy going on in that kind of traditional role we get into. What I want to talk to us today on the call is being more of an architect, right? Of shifting more to being a builder rather than just taking down the orders of what the organization needs. And this requires a lot of intention, the most amount of intention, because this process is incredibly complicated. There's so much going on. There's so many different areas. If you just think about screening and the complexity of that, even with the selection piece, they are so complicated and they're all part of the same process. There's a lot that can go off the rails. So we need to be very, very intentional about how we build things, and we need to have the right mindset to help us do that. So maybe more of the traditional mindset could be, I got to screen all these people out. I got to look at all these resumes, get rid of all these candidates because I got to get this role filled now. I got to hurry as fast as I can. Speed is really, really important. And I don't want to take away from that because it is important that we are as quick as we can be. Like, we got to be agile and nimble and deliver what the business needs. But a lot of this comes at the expense of the experience. Speed is almost always going to come at a negative trade-off with the experience for candidates. So if we can converse that with being more of a builder, right? If we think about how we can screen in candidates, I know. I talk about with my friends in talent acquisition. They're like, Lynanne, that's just, I'm like, no, but listen, hear me out, okay? The talent, we need as much talent as we can find. Let's screen it in. Let's find ways that we can engage. Even if we don't hire these people, how can we engage and build a real relationship? And we can, all of those things will help us build better trust, will help us with our strategy, and will help us with better communication. Okay, let's move on. Next, so all of these things I'm going to say about this process are not new. They are all things that we already know. They're just incredibly difficult to execute really well. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but as we think about the process that we need to have a good experience, it basically boils down to these three things. We need to have our hiring stages. We need to have them dialed in. We're not going to have 7 steps, okay? We're not going to do that. We're going to have our steps defined, and then we're going to be communicative. We're going to communicate consistently. And the way that we do this is by gaining trust and buy-in from our leaders and aligning our coaches and coaching our managers, okay? So let's talk about the number of hiring stages, because a lot of times we don't necessarily have the most control of this. A lot of times in HR, we inherit the systems that are already working. And we're always so busy that it's like, okay, we'll get to looking at that later. And then later never comes because we're so busy and we wear so many hats. But if we can make a 1% improvement in each of these areas as we go through, we can make a big impact eventually. But the number of hiring stages, I think, is a really good low-hanging fruit to work at. We don't need a whole bunch of steps, okay? In my humble opinion, I don't know, maybe if someone has a different idea, we could talk about it. I'd love to debate that over some lunch. But the other thing is, as we think about our process, some of these are selected and picked out by our leaders that feel like they need to be in all of these interviews. And maybe they do. Maybe they do. But what happens and what can sometimes happen is the senior leaders are so busy and their schedule just slows everything down. And that makes the candidate experience difficult. But sometimes what happens is leaders haven't had good experience with this process and they don't necessarily trust HR. And so they're like, you know what, I don't know if you guys know what you're doing. This is what I think we're going to do. And so part of what we need to do is put on that architect mindset, and we need to get trust and buy-in from our leaders to say, if we invest in this process, it will make a difference and it will make an impact. And this is how we can do it. We can build this into the process so that the leaders can trust it. And by the way, not everyone needs to be an interviewer, and it needs to be a special, almost like a special role that people get. I think that's one of the traps that we can kind of fall in, is everyone wanting to be an interviewer that maybe shouldn't be. Okay, but that kind of comes into this alignment and coaching the managers and making sure, because I think it's really easy to say, train managers, right? But what are we training them on? And it's we are training them and getting their buy-in on making sure that this positive experience matters, it's prioritized, and that we are consistent with it. Okay, I'm maybe belaboring the point a little bit too much. Let's move to the next one, and we can talk a little bit more about we can be a little bit more specific. So as we talk about communication, that's just so easy to be like, okay, great, everyone communicate. Great. I told them what to do and they know what to do. This is so difficult to do really well. As we look at our hiring process, we already have our defined stages, and they're, we got it pared down as much as we can that makes sense for our organization. And it makes sense too that it's different, right? Your organization is not going to have the same process as other people's, and that's okay. You need to have what works for you. But do we have a framework that we use of each stage of what piece of communication that candidate needs and when? Okay, so we're being very intentional about what we're communicating and when. And then we can use templates or things in our ATS, our applicant tracking system, to help us with the communication and consistency. We'll talk a little bit about the ATS in a minute, but with the templates, there is a way that you can build a library of templates. You have a variety of templates for all sorts of scenarios where you can craft a communication that feels applicable to an individual, even though it's not custom. So we can make the candidate, we can improve that consistency, even though it is an automated message, right? But we can be smart with the way that we're using the templates, and that we have a variety to choose from, right? If we just have one rejection template, like, we will have one of those, right? But think about all the different variations that we could put into our templates that could help us have a more meaningful communication that way. Yeah.
Hey, Lynn Ann, can I ask a question on that? So 2 questions on the communication piece. I know things can vary by industry and position that you're hiring for, but what would you say is kind of a target time frame, like number of days that the candidate experience should last ideally? That's the first question. And second would be, how often
that is such a good question. Let's go to the next slide. Because really, the how often, I think I go back and forth on it, because we don't want to inundate people, right? People can tolerate waiting, but they can't tolerate the uncertainty. So I really appreciate the question, because I'm not saying we should just blast all of these things to people at, all of the communication all the time. That's not intentional, and that's not effective. But what we do want to make sure is that the candidate always knows what's next. So if there's a way that we can communicate in a meaningful way to say, just so that they know what's next. So that's kind of a non-answer, because it's so highly specific to that. Your other question is also a non-answer. Like, it would really depend on your organization, the role, the level of skill needed, I think. All of those are going to be really big factors on, like, when we want to do it. So I know 2 non-answers, Matt, sorry. Yeah. And so if we think about this, with each stage, we think about what information they need at each stage. In between each stage, like, there's going to be waiting. That's just part of the process. People's schedules are crazy. But in between each stage, we have the opportunity that we can send them information so that they can be more prepared for the next stage. So, for example, in the phone screen, right? After the phone screen, we can have an automated thing set up. So, great, congratulations, you finished your phone screen. Here's a video of your hiring manager. This is the person you're going to be meeting with next. This is a quick bio about what they do. And then your interview will contact you with the details of when that will be, right? But in the meantime, they have something for them from us that can help them educate and engage with our brand. We can send them information about our products or our services for them to read and understand in between the stages. We can send them a day in the life update, because really what we want to be doing in this experience, one of the main purposes is we want them to be able to visualize themselves working in our job, right? Like as a realtor takes you to a property, they want you to visualize yourself living there, right? And we want to think about that as we're going through this process of, we want people to visualize themselves working here on our team. What information can we give them so that they can feel excited or imagine themselves working here? Okay, love it. Okay, let's move this little guy on. So as I think I mentioned a little bit about an ATS before, I think I just want to pause real quick on this point, because I worked in organizations where we didn't have an ATS or an applicant tracking system. We used Excel, and I even worked at a place that was very small and we used sticky notes. I don't recommend that, and I would have loved to have an ATS. So if you have an ATS right now that's not meeting your needs, or if you don't have an ATS, I just want to do a quick reminder that you don't need an expensive, clunky, bulky, complicated ATS. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. The HR tech world right now there's an explosion of really cool solutions out there right now. So consider finding a tool that works best for you, and make sure always with any tool that we're trying to implement is, what problem are we trying to solve? If we're thinking specifically, if we go through our process and we notice we have a lack of engagement, or we have a problem with consistency, what tool can help us with that? And there are so many options out there. So if you have a legacy ATS that is not helping you right now, it's worth looking. And there's so many exciting things. And I know that it's hard because the implementations are not that easy, but as we go through the implementations and all these things, it's getting better and better and much more easier to switch. So just a little thing about that. As we think about consistency and communication, the tool that we choose is going to be so key for helping us with that. Okay, and we can go to the next one. And speaking of tools, we are not getting out of here without talking about AI. I want to make sure that this is very brief, because it's almost like we talk about AI and then it's kind of like a collective eye roll, maybe even a groan. But what I do want to just touch on it really quick is what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. A lot of organizations are using AI to screen people out and automate rejection. And that's, I guess, maybe just part of it. But I just want to touch on this idea that we could use our tools smarter than that. We can use AI to educate our candidates, to provide updates, to improve the communication, and to help us maybe even find and re-engage our past applicants, right? It shouldn't just automate the way that we reject people. It really should be helping us improve the connection piece. And I know that sounds so cheesy, but I don't like the way that it's being used in a lot of the settings with recruiting right now. And it makes me a little nervous. Okay, but enough about that. Let's talk about measuring. So kind of what I was talking about a little bit earlier, when we focus on speed, I think a lot of the traditional core talent acquisition or recruiting metrics are time to fill. And that's a great metric, and a lot of organizations use it. And I'm not saying don't use it, but I'm just saying these metrics right here, like the cost per hire, like cost matters for sure, right? With the world we live in, we have to think about cost. We have to, but they don't tell us the whole story. They're only giving us a little bit. These do nothing. They don't give us any indication about our candidate experience. And they are not letting us know how that is going on any level. So some things for you to think about would be some new metrics, and those are on the next slide. So again, we want to think about what problem we're trying to solve. If we want a better insight for how our process is going, some good metrics could be looking at our candidate satisfaction with the process. You could use that in a candidate net promoter score, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend applying to our organization? You can use that free of charge. You could also look at candidate drop-off rates. I don't think enough people are looking at this. When are candidates dropping off? What specific stage? This could actually help us a lot too. If we have a really bulky process, this could give us some good evidence for getting that a little bit shortened up. We can also look at our reapplication rates, right? That's a good thing. We want to be able to have people who know about our brand applying and trying to work with us. One of the things that I think is my favorite, though, would be this mid-process survey. Are we reaching out to the candidate with a very short, very easy survey about how their experience is going so far? That can give us a lot of information to help understand how the experience is going for our candidates. I was talking with a friend getting ready for this presentation, and he mentioned that he had a friend who worked as a secret, so not like a secret shopper, like a secret applier. They would apply for the company and go through the process and provide feedback on how it was for them. So they had a fake name and a fake resume, and they went through the process as the company hired them to do it. So that could be kind of a fun way to get some insight on how your process is going and how consistent it is for people. Okay, so here we're wrapping up. But again, I just want to leave you with kind of these 5 main ideas, right? Our culture is what our candidates experience, not what we tell them. Every candidate that goes through our process is going to leave with a story, and we want them to leave with a positive story. We don't want people leaving with a whole bunch of negative experiences. As we're consistent, it helps build trust. And we want to make sure that we're thinking a little bit more like an architect, and we want to measure the experience, not just efficiency when it comes to our metrics. Okay, well, that's it for me. This is my LinkedIn profile. Please feel free to connect with me. I would love to connect. And if anyone has any questions, and if Matt, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. This was really informative. And honestly, I think sometimes we underestimate the influence that the recruiting function has on a business. I mean, you are kind of like a buyer. Like, I don't want to dehumanize this, but you're responsible for significant investments that the company makes in hiring people. And I sell software. I sell Mobrium solution for reputation management. And it's kind of interesting where sometimes we see a bazillion hoops that a vendor has to jump through for this little spend to solve a problem. But then HR is spending a lot on salaries. And sometimes we way oversimplify and don't take this process seriously. But if we think about how much the business depends on producing profits and growing, like when we bring a team member on to a company, they represent a significant financial investment from the company, and it's totally worth us doing our due diligence to make this process as good as it can be and have that positive outcome both for who ends up being hired, who doesn't get hired, and what they say and think about the company. So I'm just saying, like, totally agree with all the things that
I love that you talk about the investment of it. And it's crazy, payroll is one of the largest expenses of a company, and sometimes it doesn't get, we need to be very strategic with it.
Any other questions from anybody else? Feel free to unmute if you have something. We've got a couple more minutes, or in the chat. And while you're thinking of your questions, I just want to give one last reminder. Make sure to subscribe to our email newsletter on the bottom of mobrium.com so you can see what future events are coming up. This one was incredible. We're so grateful for Lynn Ann. And if you have any questions about reputation management that really pairs well with the recruiting process, candidates see your ratings and reviews on Glassdoor and Indeed and the other sites, and they're asking chat, like ChatGPT and the other AIs, tell me about what people are saying about this company, or what's it like to work here? And AI's aggregating all of that review feedback, and it may be damaging your ability to recruit, even if you have a stellar process. So if you want us to do an audit of your reputation, we do that for free. So just let us know. But yeah, lots of thank yous in the chat. And Lynn Ann, any final words in our last couple minutes here?
More about it, if anyone is interested.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone, for being here. And we'll get the follow-up sent out by Friday with the recording and the SHRM PDC activity code. So thank you, guys. Really appreciate you being here.